Hello again. Today I'd like to talk about using layout to lay out a sheet of drawings or sheets of drawings using your SketchUp model as a reference. So basically, setting up your model is the best thing to do first, and I have a number of different scenes, including plan views, sections, and interior perspectives of various flavors. The big thing is on the default toolbar, there is a button called Send to Layout, and it looks kind of like a red box with an arrow. And I'll click that button, and what SketchUp will do is send your model to a program called Layout. And of course, you have to save the model first, always a good idea. And of course, I would strongly recommend that you back up your models before you go messing around with anything else. In layout, it's very similar to AutoCAD's layout spaces in that what you do is you set up a size paper and you have viewports where you have views of your model. And what you can see here from this list, it has a list of different size pages, including A sizes, A1 through 4. Or maybe 0 through 4, and then some of the arch sizes, in this case arch D landscape. There's a number of different ones. Some have title blocks and some don't. I'm going to choose one with a title block just so you can see what it looks like. And arch D is 24 by 36, and that makes an awfully nice sheet of drawings that's easy to handle, prints out well on our 36-inch wide plotter paper. So anyway, I'm going to use ArchD, and I'll just click Open. And what you'll see is that you end up with a sheet here in your view space. There is, if I click on the image, it actually is a viewport. So kind of similar to AutoCAD, you can click on the grips on the corners to resize this image. Now the trick is when I resize it, it will fill whatever kind of opening I have created, whatever kind of viewport, because this is a 3D model. So there is more model, or usually there is more model, to be viewed. So you have to be cognizant that by changing the viewport size, you actually are changing the composition of the drawing. Obviously that has to be something that you'd want to do. Now, let me close up some of these menus. On the Mac, what you'll find is not all of these menus are available. Right away, you have to open some of them up. On the PC, it seems like half of them are already open when you call up the program. First of all, the one that many of you like is this instructor. And what this will do is if you click on a tool, it will tell you what the tool does. Now, Layout does have tooltips that show up by default on the Mac version, which you can kind of scroll through and get an idea of how things work. On the PC, you just have to click on a tool, and the instructor will tell you how the tool works. And again, this is very similar to SketchUp. In fact, all these tools that are available here, and there's very few, most of these actually are pretty much the same as the SketchUp tool. There's arcs and rectangles and other sorts of shapes. The big trick is you're not drawing in the model or on the model. I'm not sure what the right pronoun is. You are just drawing in what essentially is paper space or layout space. Okay, so when you draw these shapes, it's just things to add borders and notes to drawings that already exist. Okay, so here is my SketchUp model, and like I said, you can control the cropping. You can also make copies of this model. It's pretty easy. On a PC, you hold down Control and click and drag. So it's kind of like the move copy command in the main model. Also, when you do that, you will notice, I'll drag it off to the right here, you should see sooner or later the red line that indicates that you're dragging and making a copy perfectly horizontal as opposed to going vertical. That is the green direction. So again, if I go down, you should see sooner or later the green direction show up. And again, sometimes you have to kind of mouse around, just like in SketchUp, the full version. So it's easy enough to make a copy. I can also use Control or Command-C and Command-V to make a copy of a viewport. and I can drag that over. Okay. And each viewport, of course, it's the same model that they're referencing, but each viewport can be unique. So in this viewport, I can change the view. If I want to just make simple changes to the perspective view, I can double click inside the viewport, and now I have my orbit command. And in fact, if you right click, there are several other tools, view tools available, and you can even change scenes and styles if you'd rather do it that way, and turn on and off shadows or even perspective. Okay, so it's quite easy, and of course the scroll wheel commands are available if you'd rather use those. Okay. Now, that's easy enough to do inside the model, but the best way to operate within layout, I believe, is to use the scenes and styles that are set up in your SketchUp model. I find it's just easier to make those changes there. And when I open the SketchUp model toolbar here, what I see is there's an area where you can choose the scenes, or you can choose standard views, whichever one you prefer. Now, I've already set things up to have different views. So for example, I have an interior perspective. I also had an overview. And layout knows that the overview, it remembers all the scene and style settings. The only trick is that the viewport size may or may not match what you're hoping for. So for example, in this one, I want to see a little bit more model. So I can just double click inside there and then change the view of the model. Because I have set my background color to be white, this viewport basically disappears when I'm done with it. So you have to be aware that that's may be something you want, or it may be something you don't want, but it's something that you can definitely control. So again, this is the same model. In this one, I can have another view, and this could be a sketchy perspective, for example. Again, the cropping is going to be different depending on what I have set up. And maybe I'll make one more copy and I'll do another line work type of drawing. And SketchUp tries hard to align these different views, and that's what all those little cues are about, those cursor cues. Let's try this one, sketchy number 2, and see what we come up with. Okay. So you can see we have different views of the model. Actually, I don't like that one so much. Maybe I'll try perspective number 2. Oh, yes, that's lovely. Now, when you lay out this sheet of drawings, of course, like most layout programs, you can have overlaps between these viewports. All I have to do is move one viewport on top of the other. And I can, under the arrange, right-click on the view, and under the arrange grouping, I can send it forward or backward, bring it to the front, depending on how you want to compose your drawings. Okay, and of course that has to do with what you expect when you print out your sheet. And there we go. Now, the other thing that you can do, so this is your SketchUp model, that you're modifying, you can put in things like either title blocks or organizational graphics. So for example, let's say I want a line to show up underneath these drawings and then have some text maybe explaining what's going on. I can draw a line. And when you draw in layout, it's like a lot of other programs, probably closer to InDesign or AutoCAD, where you can change the style of that line. The biggest thing is the stroke. The stroke is how many, the dimension of the line. So if I'll just change this to 11 so you can see the big difference. See how it gets a lot bigger. Whoops. It gets a lot bigger. And you can change the color, of course, and let's make it, well, I don't know, greenish. How about that? Okay, so you can see how it changes to green, and you can even add other things, including whether or not you want an arrow at the beginning or at the end. Okay, so the stroke is the line weight. If you happen to want to draw a shape, for example, if I want a shape for the text to go into, I'll click on the shape. That has both stroke and fill, and of course, like all programs, you can color pick in a number of ways, RGB or through a color wheel, and you can control the opacity of that color. So I get a nice little background color, maybe getting rid of the stroke. There we go. And to get rid of the stroke, by the way, you can just click the stroke button and the line should disappear. And you can even add in patterns if you're so inclined. There are not a whole lot of patterns that are available, but you can obviously browse around and look for them. Typically, people use these tools just for background images and not for actual drawing of architectural stuff. So contain yourself when it comes to that. Now, drawing text is very similar. You click the text tool, and it's kind of like a text box either in PowerPoint or in InDesign. Click and draw to show the size of the text box. Now, in SketchUp, I'm sorry, in the Windows version of Layout, I'm just going to close these. There's a toolbar over here for text style, so I can make this a nice and big piece of text and say, you know, whatever, drawing over here. On the Mac, you have to type and right-click, and there will be a menu option in that context-sensitive menu for text style. Okay, so PC, the text menu shows up here. On the Mac, it shows up separately. And these are all objects that you can copy, and again, just holding down Control allows you to make these changes. And in fact, these are elements that you can copy from one sheet to another. So these are the standard perspective views. Let's make another sheet of drawings, and the way to do that is if you go here in these menus to the Pages menu, what you'll see, first of all, hey, there's 2 pages in here. Who knew it? When you use a title block, usually they have a different one for the title page. So maybe you'll decide that you like that one better than the inside page. If not, you can use either one, and in fact you don't have to use a ready-made title block at all. I'm just using one to show you how they work. Now I'm going to make another inside page because I like this vertical title block here, and just click on the page and click the little plus sign. If you like the cover page, you can duplicate the cover page instead of the inside page. But anyway, I'll click the new page, and here's a blank one for page 3, and it's certainly easy enough to select multiple objects by holding down Shift, copy, either Control or Command C, and then go to the next page and paste in. Whoops, maybe. There we go. Now, these new views, of course, they're still viewports, so just like any viewports that we've seen before, you can go to the SketchUp model and you can call up a view. Now, I could easily set up a floor plan, okay, and this will be my sheet of orthographic drawings. And the nice thing is that, well, very similar to AutoCAD, you can set the scale of this viewport very easily. You just choose it from a drop-down list. The big thing is when you do that, you know, hopefully you've already set up a saved scene where the top view is set. If not, make sure you do, because you cannot have perspective in a orthographic view. And then you'll just want to change the cropping of the viewport so that you can see the entire floor plan. And of course, it would be nice if I could actually read my drawing title, which I can now. And the other thing, there's other tools, for example, nudge. I'm nudging. I know you can't see it, but I'm nudging using the arrow key to draw that text up a little higher. Also, I can copy multiple things at the same time. So I have several objects selected, but this view I'm going to set to be one of my section views. Whoa, there we go. Okay. Now, and this is really handy because SketchUp likes to align views. So usually if you do it this way, you have a pretty good shot of getting them close to being aligned. All right, and there we go. There's my section view. And in fact, it even remembers that it was 1/4 inch scale because I copied the view. Now, one thing that is nice about layout is that you can add in other models. It's very easy to import other models. So for example, let's say I wanted to do a nice view of this front desk, but separate without the rest of the model around it. Now there's a number of ways that I could do that. First of all, if you want to access the SketchUp model, just right-click on a viewport and choose Open with SketchUp. And what it will do is, if you didn't have it open already, it will open it all up. Now, I already have it open, so I'll just go to my SketchUp model. Now, if you have a component, and let me go to my overview here. How convenient is that? If you're like me and your SketchUp model for your custom element, in this case the front desk, is inside the rest of your SketchUp model. So in this case, I didn't create it separately. I created it inside this model. You need to get it out of this model so that you can insert it all on its lonesome into your layout project. Now, it's pretty easy. You just right-click on the model or on the component and choose Save As, and this will allow you to save it out of this model into a separate component. And of course, you want to name it something that you'll remember what it is. I'll just call it desk-reception and save. And now when I go to Layout, I should be able to insert. So I'll go to the File menu and choose Insert and browse to find that model, which I believe I stuck on the desktop. And there it is. Now I just wanted to have a nice view of this front desk all on its lonesome because it's such a cool design. So maybe I want to double click inside here and come up with a view that really shows off this desk to its best. Okay? Now, that's a very handy way. And of course I could set up orthographic views, and I could do that either in here by using top views and turning on ortho, or I could do it in the SketchUp model itself. And of course titles and that sort of thing. Now, the last piece of the layout puzzle, you can add all these different things. In fact, you can even add rendered images. So if we get to rendering this semester, you can insert those rendered images. These are at quarter scale, which should be plenty big for our needs. And I've got 2 sections and a plan. I've also got my front desk. Now, the last thing is, what do you do with this title block? Now, title blocks are a little tricky, okay, because they involve what are called layers. And these layers, I'll go down here in my tab, are very similar to what you'll see in AutoCAD, except that there just aren't that many. Now, first of all, the default layer is just what you draw pretty much everything on. Everything that is not a title for a sheet. Now, unique elements is basically the same thing. Now, the trick is there are some elements which will show up on every inside page. Now, those are basically these elements. In fact, what you'll see if I click on an object, this little dot indicates what layer that element is on. If I click on anything on the title block, it should show up on every inside page. You might say, well, what good is that? Well, let's draw, I don't know, let's draw a little shape to give some color to my title block. I'll select it and I will give it, let's see, let's go and give it some fill and a slight, only less than 100% opacity. And in fact, I'm going to move it to the back. Okay, now what you might say is, oh, that is really nice. I wish I could get that on my other title sheet. Well, you can, because I drew it on the layer that's on every inside page. Now, if I go to another page, lo and behold, that element is on there. Now, and that's really handy if you're setting up a title block and you're kind of designing your sheets of drawings. Now, this one has some other junk in here, including an image for a logo. Okay, you can just go to File, pull down menu, and insert. And generally, most image files should show up fine. Here we go. We'll put a picture of my lovely kids. and you can move that onto your title block. And everything pretty much, you have to make sure that it's on the correct layer if you want it to show up on every sheet. Okay. Now, when you stretch these things, by the way, like with other programs, if you hold down Shift, it will lock it so that the proportions don't change. Okay. And if I put that on there, and we'll go to page 3, you can see that image shows up. Any text that I were to put in on this layer, again, I've just clicked on this layer that I want to draw on the title block. The little pencil icon indicates that anything I draw will be on that layer. The last thing about the title block, there is some stuff in here that is a little odd. That stuff is controlled centrally. Okay, if you go to the File pull-down menu and go to the Document Setup, what you'll see is there's a field for, or a panel for what's called Autotext. Now, if I were to change this information to, I don't know, Beverly, Massachusetts, and close, the project information changes on every sheet. See how it says Beverly, Massachusetts. Now, this is great when you're doing a large set of, say, construction drawings. For you guys, you may or may not want to use this auto text. The auto text comes in with most of these title blocks. If you don't want it, all you have to do is select it. And you can either delete it or you can convert it from auto text to just regular text. Okay? And then it will ignore that project information. Now, some of you, so that's pretty much it for title blocks. Now, some of you might be saying, hey, what if I want to make a change to the model? For example, this flooring, you know, I don't really like that so much. If I go back to my SketchUp model, and let's say I just come in with the paint bucket and I choose some other color, perhaps a green carpet. Oh yes, much better. Now I'm going to save this model, and it actually doesn't even matter what view I'm in. I'm just going to do save. When I go back to layout, well, you know, it doesn't recognize that the model has changed, but in order to get things to update, I have two ways I can do it. I can either right-click on the model and choose Update Model Reference, and what that will do, that will look back to the SketchUp model and see if anything's changed. And if it has, it will update these views. Now, if I've changed any of the scenes or the view that was, some of these viewports are actually referencing the last scene that was on in SketchUp. If so, then that will change. See, it says last saved view in SketchUp. But if I've used a saved scene, it won't make a difference in terms of changing these viewports. Now, the other thing is that once you've updated it, you can continue to work, and this is actually a great collaboration tool because one person can be working on the model while somebody else is fiddling around in layout, putting together the final drawings. Also, in that same document setup menu, there are a number of other things you can do. You can turn on a grid. Some of you like grids, some of you don't like grids. You can also change the sheet size. Now, if you have a title block that you're using, be aware that when you change the sheet size, that of course changes the title block. So be careful about that. The other thing is the output quality. Typically, while you're editing it, you want it to be medium quality. If you're finding your computer is getting a little slow, choose low quality during your edits. What that will do is that will just give you a lower resolution that you can look at, but you can certainly make the output quality a high quality. Anyway, the other thing is that the references, these are things that are inserted into your model, and it will actually give you the path that returns it. If you have modified any of these, they will indicate that you have over here in this list. You can just update them in this way. Anyway, and then last but not least, you can choose you can choose the units for your project. So there you go. You've got a beautiful project. How do you print it? Very straightforward. You can either go and print it directly from SketchUp, from Layout. And of course, this is fine. And if you have the Adobe printer, which I have, Adobe PDF, you can just save it as a PDF. If you're on a Mac, you can save it as a PDF in the print menu as well. You can also just present from this view. If I choose Start Presentation, it will call up in full screen whatever view you had, whatever sheet you had. In this case, I have 3 sheets. There's nothing on the first sheet. But my other 2 views it will put in full screen mode. You can also export as a PDF or as single images, and this depends. Sometimes it's necessary to fix the model in Photoshop if things aren't showing up correctly. This is quite common because things just don't always render the way you were hoping, or you end up with weird little spots which need to be cleaned up. Anyway, when you choose export as a PDF, like with other programs, it just tells you, where do you want to save it, and you choose, my project, put this on the desktop. Anyway, and it gives you a number of options, including how many pages you want, and I'm going to leave out page 1 because there's nothing on there, and it will create layers and all that. Okay, so that is pretty much it for the land of layout, and it's pretty straightforward as far as these programs go. So once you've learned something like AutoCAD, this should seem fairly straightforward.